This video will help you understand the historical skill of sourcing a document. This document has been modified, and there is some inappropriate language in the document that I will be skipping over. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get a document is read the full document from the very beginning to the end. And then we'll go back and break it apart. Okay, this interview with William Colbert, a 93-year-old slave from Alabama. The interview was conducted by John Morgan Smith in 1937. Smith worked for the Federal Writers Project. The Federal Writers Project, FWP, was established in 1935 as part of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. The project, a branch of the Work Progress Administration, WPA, was designed to employ writers, editors, historians, and researchers who were out of work during the Great Depression. Initially, the FWP's main project was to write guidebooks that would inform readers about the history, culture, economic of different areas of the country. Soon, however, the WFP took a variety of writing and research projects that would document other aspects of the American culture at the time. Interviewer: Well, Uncle Will, tell me something about the slave days. Was your master good to you? William Colbert: No, sir, he wasn't good to none of us, and all of the ends around hated to be bought by him because he was so mean. One day, I remember my brother, January, was caught overseeing a girl in the next plantation. Well, sir, when the master found out that he was an hour late, he got mad as a hive of bees. So when brother January came home, the master took him down, his long mule Skinner, and tied him with a rope to the pine tree. He stripped off his shirt and said, "Now I'm going to teach you some sense." With that, he started laying on the lashes. January was a big, fine-looking end, the finest I've ever seen. He was just 4 years older than me, and when the master began beating him, January never said a word. The master got madder because he couldn't make January hollow. "What's the matter with you, N?" he said. Don't it hurt?" January, he never said nothing, and the master kept beating till some little streams of blood started flowing down January's chest, but he never hollered. His lips were quivering and his body was shaking, but his mouth never opened. And all the while I sat on my mommy's and pappy's steps crying. The N was all gathered, and some of them couldn't stand it. They had to go inside their cabins. Vocabulary: long mule Skinner is a large whip. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is read the document. And you always want to kind of go over here to number 4, because that's the grade you want to get. So let's read what number 4 says. Student can cite the author and date of the document, as well as to whom was the audience the document was directed, and can determine the position of the author, as well as any bias the author, and can evaluate whether the information in the document is reliable. Alright, so if you look up here, we could see that we need to cite the author and the date. So let's go up here, and you can see right up on top they're going to have the author was John. So be careful reading this, because you don't want to put William Colbert. But the author is John Morgan Smith, and the date is 1937. So you can see here, the first thing I type, the author of the document is John Smith, Morgan Smith. The document's created in 1937. So then the next part, we're going to get to it over here, says, to whom was the audience, was it directed to? What's the audience? And the position. Well, I know from reading the top up here who the audience is. If I read this whole thing right here, it tells me that it was a government program for the public. So the audience is going to be the public. And that J.P. Morgan is a historian, because it talks about researchers and historians right here. So I'm pretty confident I could just say that. So if you go down, you can see the document was created in 1937. The author is a writer from the Federal Writers Project, so the audience was the general public. I know this because on top of the document states that he worked for the Federal Writers Project. Okay, so the next thing, after we do that, and you already got, by doing that, you have it half done, you got half the points. The next big thing is determining reliability and bias. Okay, so bias means Does he have? Is he bitter? Is he angry? Is he trying to push an agenda? It doesn't necessarily mean he's lying or anything like that, but we just want to at least get the sense where he's coming from. So you could see here, and is it reliable? So if you're talking about if it's reliable, it means in answering the question, does that document have reliability? Could we use this document to solve the historical question? And this historical question is, how were slaves treated in the South? So as you can see here, I typed, in answering the historical question, how were slaves treated in the South, this document would be reliable because it interviewed a former slave who lived in Alabama as a slave. So, if you're asking how slaves were treated and how their life was, and what was life like for a slave, interviewing a slave who lived through it would make it pretty reliable. Now, it's not 100% reliable, but I would say it's highly reliable. And then is there bias to it? So that's the next part, which you can see I have right here. There is bias in this document. The former slave most likely resented being a slave, so therefore told only the most awful stories about being a slave. For example, William Colbert states, January, he never said nothing. The master kept beating him till little streams of blood started flowing down January's chest, but he never hollered. Colbert relays a truly horrible story to highlight the brutality of slavery. Now again, it doesn't mean he's lying. It was awful. But we don't know if the majority of slaves were treated like this, if some were. So this is a first step in trying to answer the historical question. But it's a good step. So now what we're going to do, and we'll do it later on with the other historical skills, is find context, and then we're going to try to corroborate this document with the other one. So if we could find documents from Louisiana, Virginia, all the other states, and the majority of them say the same thing that our guy says, Colbert, then I think we could pretty much say with pretty much confidence that, yeah, slaves are treated horrible. Okay? So now look, I threw a lot at you here. If you still have more questions, please sign up for Spartan Plus and come see your teacher, whichever history teacher you have, and we'll work one-on-one with you to make sure you get this skill. Please answer the following 2 questions in Ed Puzzle so we can get some feedback. Thank you.